Hello and welcome to episode 68 of the Spotlight Games podcast. My name is Patrick, and today we're going to be talking about the Dead Space remake, first impressions. We're going to be talking about is Uncharted coming to PlayStation 5. We're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff, and we're going to be talking about all that stuff with my sweet, sweet dumpster boy, Cayman Darty. Cayman, how we doing?
Patrick, I'm doing good.
Ooh, sounded a little spicy there.
Doing good.
Oh boy, we're getting to Cayman. I don't know that we've ever gotten before on this show.
Maybe we'll find out.
How's your week going? I mean, I know we're early in the week, but
Whew. You know what? Let me tell you, Patrick.
tell me.
I'm excited.
Ooh, I love an excited dumpster boy. Why are you excited?
I'm excited, Patrick, because tonight marks our last recording of the week, which means I can finally dedicate some time to playing some video games.
Hell yeah! What are you playing first after we record tonight?
I'm thinking it's time to get into a little game called Dead Space, but I don't want to say too much because I know you're going to.
Sure. I'm not going to go too deep because we're going to be reviewing it for the show soon with Boston Mike. A little part 2 to the Callisto Protocol discussion. But at least, for our folks out there that are interested in what we're thinking, I want to at least say, hey, I've been playing. Here's what I think. But we're going to get into that because we have a lot of video game stuff to talk about, because this is the Spotlight Games podcast where each week we spotlight the latest and the greatest in the world of video games. You can get it by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Spotlight Games Pod, or by searching for Spotlight Games in your favorite podcast app. And hey, you can be on the show by tuning in as we record live Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time on twitch.tv/Spotlight Games Pod, like we are right now. We got people in the chat right now. Hello, my friends. How are we? We got who's here? We got John. Of course, we got John in the chat.
Of course, we got John.
Why would it not? Why would it be anyone other than John? How you doing, John? But yeah, go follow us on Twitch so that you're notified when we go live, so you can be part of the conversation. Cayman, we have, as we've talked about for the last several weeks, we've launched another podcast, Spotlight TV. We just dropped yesterday, last evening, as of recording, a deep dive into episode 3 of HBO's The Last of Us. Some are calling one of the greatest episodes of television ever. I might be one of those. Some
the one. I'm definitely one.
So if you're interested in a deep dive of that episode, if you want to cry with us, go follow Spotlight TV. Find them on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon/Audible podcasts, and give it a listen, give it a download, give it a follow, give it a subscribe. Because look, I said it last week. I'm gonna toot the horn. I feel like we're making good shit. I think that podcast is pretty good. I think we got a lot of good insight because we played these games so many times. So if you like The Last of Us, give it a look-see, give it a listen. But depending on time, we might talk a little spoilery Last of Us episode 4, what we hope to see in episode 4 at the very, very end of the show. So don't worry right now if you're like, I don't want to know what your spoiler thoughts are. It'll be at the very end. But Cayman, that's not the only podcast that we released this week so far, is it?
It's true.
What else did we do?
Come out today for Save Trash Cinema, the podcast.
Ooh,
yeah. Save Trash Cinema, the podcast is live today. If you are wherever you are, whatever you're doing is live. Guess what? You can watch it, or if you can't watch it, you can listen. This episode is entirely dedicated to Days of the Dead 2023, which is a huge horror convention in the Southeast that brings along a lot of familiar faces and new faces of the genre. They have panels, they have autograph signings, they have so many vendors. I spent so much money. I don't want to talk about it. But it is a fantastic time. That entire episode is a recap of the week. We tell some really great anecdotes about some of the people we met, including none other than Damian Leone and David Howard Thornton from potentially the next huge horror franchise, Terrifier. We also got to meet one of my heroes, the founder of Troma Films, Troma Entertainment, none other than Lloyd Kaufman. We talk about that. We talk about some other amazing people that we met along the way. And man, I'm just telling you, it's a really fun discussion. It's a trash talk episode. So we do like a roundtable discussion telling some of our favorite moments over the weekend. We also were a little intoxicated for it.
Oh, come on.
I mean, look, when you leave a convention, a 3-day convention, Like you're gonna be a little torn up if you
Oh
know
yeah,
what I mean.
it's
So
in a lot of places.
this potentially could be the first day I have been sober
Woo!
in multiple days, and you guys are all welcome for that because I can be even spicier
I mean, that's
sometimes.
true. I gotta say though, Cayman, from where I'm sitting,
Mm,
I can feel a little rejuvenation in the dumpster boy. I can feel there's an energy coming from you, and I think it's
yeah.
from Days of the Dead.
Look, man, it's fantastic. Like I said, we met a lot of really cool people, and I can tell you right now, we have some exciting stuff lined up from STC that occurred over the weekend. So we got some cool people that might be making a guest appearance on some future episodes. Wink,
Is
wink.
it Gary Busey? You'll have to find out.
He's been dead for years. Actually, I don't think Gary Busey is dead, but honestly, he probably is, and no one would know the difference. But no.
He died after Point Break.
I can say just a little quick anecdote. I'm not sure if we covered this on the episode, but Malcolm McDowell was there, and I might have definitely ran directly into him while walking out of the
Ooh.
bathroom.
Oh boy.
And honestly, super nice. I
Oh
was
really?
I was expecting him to be really shitty because he always plays like kind of pompous assholes. But in
Sure.
real life, like actually a nice guy. Like I ran into him, was like, I'm so sorry. I opened the door and we just boop. I said, I'm so sorry. And he looked at me in that deep, sultry British
Oh
accent.
yeah.
It was
I'm
just like
curious.
he was like, oh,
Was he there promoting his 2022 picture with Mark Wahlberg, Father Stu? Excuse me, Father Stu?
Father Stew. Isn't it just Stew now?
I mean, you're asking the wrong guy.
Where's Boston Mike when you need him?
I know. I just Googled Malcolm McDowell just to remind myself the face. It's like, oh, of course it's Malcolm McDowell. And the fourth thing on his suggested movies is Father Stu.
Well, I
So,
mean, considering that his pedigree is far and wide on all sorts of films, probably
yes.
not that. Actually, a lot of what his panel was about Clockwork Orange,
Hmm.
and then he kind of did like it's interesting. He talked about Clockwork Orange. He talked about being in Rob Zombie's Halloween films, and genuinely, honestly, nice guy.
Oh, yeah.
He was very polite when I ran into him, which if I mean, honestly, he didn't have a reason to be polite, but he was. So,
I
good on
mean,
him.
run into someone like you out of the bathroom.
Fair.
It's 50-50.
True.
It's 50-50.
It
Well,
is.
Cayman, I'm glad you had a great time. I haven't listened to the episode yet, but it's the first thing I'm going to do when we're done here because I can't wait to hear all about the experience this weekend. But why don't we talk about some video games? What do you think?
I think that's probably what this podcast is for.
Fantastic. So we're going to start like we always start our episodes with what we've been playing. I feel like maybe you've not been playing much based on what you said at the top of the show. Do you have anything to report?
Actually, I don't, which makes me like a really shitty guest host or
No,
guest host. I guess I'm not a guest host at this point,
you're
probably,
not a
since
guest
we've been
host.
doing every episode together. No, I
Correct.
mean, I'm like a really shitty host of a video game show that hasn't played a video game
No,
in
no, no.
a week.
No. You're the subject matter expert. You're here sharing your opinions straight from the dumpster. But then, so I will say then I have been playing some games.
Please, I know you have.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag for me this week, but the main thing. So one of the stories we're going to be talking about today is going to be about the Xbox Developer _ Direct that happened last week, and one of the games that was shadow dropped, Hi-Fi Rush. I've been playing that. I'm going to talk about that during that segment. I also have been playing The Last of Us Part 1 going along with the show. Just look.
Can we have hold on? Can we have a counter that pops up every time you say like it's every time you've been playing The Last of Us? We have a counter that pops up.
I think if there's a dedicated fan out there that wants to go through all of our video podcasts and clip together all the times I've said I'm playing The Last of Us, I can't pay you, but I'd appreciate it. But no, I had this idea, and handsome Tony in the chat saying that's actually brilliant. I think so. I'm playing. So this week I stopped after the section in the game with Bill, since this episode was all about Bill and that situation. So and then next week, once I see where they go, I'm gonna play to that point in the game and just see. It's like a fun thought exercise of like seeing 1-to-1 what's different, what's the same, that kind of thing.
Question. I'm curious on how you're doing this.
Okay.
So are you basing off of what you see in the preview for the following episode, playing up to where you think it ends, or are you watching the episode, sitting down, and then playing up to where it ends?
That's a great question. So I'm kind of doing it's kind of like a both
Mhm.
situation. So like leading into the episode with Bill,
Mhm.
what I did was I played through like half of the Bill's Town chapter, watched the episode, finished that chapter, and then got up to the point in which in the game leading into the Pittsburgh chapter. Because I assume that's what the next episode will cover. So then what I'm gonna do later this week, Cayman,
Mhm.
maybe Thursday or Friday, I'm going to play a little bit of that chapter so that because ideally what I'd like to do is
Mhm.
have as much as they cover in the game played before we record Spotlight TV Monday evening. So I kind of
Okay.
front load it a little bit so that
Sure.
after the show, maybe Sunday night I play a little bit, and then Monday after work I play a little bit before we record. So I'm kind of trying to piece it together that way so that I don't have to play potentially like 2 or 3 hours of a game before we record a podcast.
I think that's a
Um,
smart idea.
yeah, but I'm having a lot of fun with it so far. And
Yeah.
also because anytime I've ever played this game, then at this point, like 9 times I've played it, it's like not one sitting, obviously, but like it's all the way through. I'll play as much as I want to play a night, and then I'll come back the next night and I'll just keep going until I finish. So
Sure.
it's been kind of fun purposefully delaying it and almost in a way treating it like a serialized thing. Um, so yeah, it's been cool and it's been fun. Like we both have like the memory of like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure it was like this, but being able to like actually experience it and like know firsthand, like, oh no, this is exactly what happened because I just did it. It's been fun to do that. But
Mhm.
I've also been playing Dead Space on the PlayStation 5.
Ooh.
And I don't want to go too deep. Like I said at the
Okay.
top of the show, we're going to be doing a full review with Boston Mike here shortly. Probably
Sure.
not next week, probably the week after, because I think we're going to have a guest next week from across the pond, Cayman, which we'll get into. But what I do want to say to our listeners and viewers that maybe if you're out there like, I only make decisions after I hear what Patrick and Cayman think. If that's how you go, you're insane.
You are insane.
But I want to at least respect your choice, your right to choice. And I got to say, this is a fucking home run. This video game.
I love to hear
I've
it.
so far played about 8 hours.
Mhm.
Friday and Saturday of this past weekend, I did like a couple 4-hour sessions late into the evening, and it is it just checks all the boxes. Like it is in this at the same time. It is the Dead Space I fell in love with in 2008, but it is improved in every single category. Obviously, things like graphics, that's a no-brainer, right? Animations, that's a no-brainer, things like that. But there's also a lot of quality of life touches that they added that's really, I think, elevated. Things like in the first game, we might have forgotten, Isaac Clarke didn't originally speak in the first game.
Sure.
Silent protagonist, giving him a voice and actually having him give a performance. Things like this, like auto saving is a lot better in this game. There are like they've kind of reworked some of the weapons and added things like alternate fire, and it actually works in this game, unlike how it did in Callisto Protocol. And there's a bunch of stuff like that. And while I do wish they had gone a little bit more the Resident Evil 2 remake route, and what I mean by that is maybe make some structural decisions to the game to improve it. I do wish they had maybe adjusted some things, which we'll get into in the review. But overall, it feels like I'm playing Dead Space for the first time, like I remember it.
Mhm.
And what I
Mhm.
mean by that is like when I close my eyes and imagine playing Dead Space, I imagine what it would look like on a PS5. But then if I actually go back and play the 2008 version, it's going to look like it's being run by a shoebox and some wire.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so
Oh,
it's
no,
like
absolutely.
it really it's I think the best thing I can say is I hope to the stars above
Mhm.
that they make Dead Space 2
Yeah.
because and then I hope that they make a new Dead Space 3 and it's not a remake of Dead Space 3 and they go their own way with
Hear
it
me out.
because yes, listening.
Dead Space 3 isn't a bad game. Dead Space 3 was ruined by EA's greedy bullshit at the time.
I think there is truth to that for
There
sure.
is some really good ideas in Dead Space 3. I love the idea of having like the asynchronized co-op mode.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant. You never see it.
Yeah.
And I think was a brilliant touch.
A little ahead of its time.
A little ahead of its time for sure. I think that a lot of that game suffer from the fact that EA tried to cram in so many microtransactions, so much extraneous bullshit DLC that
Yep.
wasn't needed, and then a
Mhm.
lot of things just completely blocked entirely by a paywall.
Right. And they shoehorned in the multiplayer of the game,
Yeah.
and that was obviously a sign of the times, like, where it's like, what, 2012, 13 at this point, they're like, "Every game has multiplayer, we gotta do multiplayer," and I guarantee you that that severely impacted development of the single player campaign, and
100%.
so because and it also it kind of Dead Space 3 falls into the trap that a lot of people feel the Resident Evil series fell into, like, with 6, where it's like, or actually maybe even more so with 5, although 5 still does have some horror elements, where 6 is like, this is just an high flying action game at this point. And that's kind of like what Dead Space 3 turned into,
Yeah.
which I think it's so funny playing Dead Space 1 after having recently, I say recent, it was a couple years ago, but I never at the time put together that Dead Space is Resident Evil, just like in space. And like it very much is a Resident Evil game. Like you can tell Glenn Schofield and the team from way back, they're like, oh, Resident Evil 4 is really, really good. Let's make that in space.
Mhm.
And I think I never put two and two together, that I think that's why I love Dead Space so much, because I love Resident Evil so much. But yeah, I just big fan of this. And if you are considering getting it, I highly recommend you get it. Because also another thing, I've not experienced this yet because I've not finished the game. There's a new alternate ending, which is cool. That makes me want to do a New Game Plus, because I think you get it via New Game Plus. But
I do
I
love a good
just,
I love horror video games that give you a new game plus. Because I do feel like kind of the thrill of playing like a horror game is like the that initial playthrough where you're very weak
yep,
and everything's terrifying. By the end, your shit's leveled up and you're much more capable, and that's kind of
yep,
the design. And I do love a new game plus, especially if there's new things involved in the new game plus where you can come back in fully loaded with
and
maxed
just
out
wreck
weapons.
them.
You can just come in and just throw in hams, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
And then then like you can actually like you feel more obligated to be like, I'm not as I can explore without being punished by some of the more survival horror aspects of a game,
yeah,
which is I think what absolutely devastated the Callisto Protocol, not having
yep.
that launch.
Yeah, and to take it a step further, something that it seems like Dead Space is doing with this remake, something that Resident Evil does with their New Game Pluses. Normally, there is more content in a New Game Plus with these kinds of games, and that is also another like
Yeah.
carrot for me to be like, oh, I want to play this again because now I can get a new ending. There's a new collectible in the New Game Plus mode. Like these are the kinds of things that like make me want to go back and play, and to your point, have that experience of being a god in this scary world. And so yeah, I'm over the moon about it. There are things I wish they did differently, but that's the way it goes. That's the way the news goes.
Mm,
But yeah, so with that being said, Cayman,
mhm,
I thought it
mhm.
might make sense to talk a little bit about the news.
Let's talk a little bit about the news.
How do you feel about that?
I love it.
So